Good evening. It's good to be with you. We're going to be talking about child training and parenting this evening. And our theme verse is going to be this one right here, Proverbs chapter 22, verse 6. Train up a child in the way he should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it. And as we mentioned yesterday, I believe that is a truism. But the thing about a truism is that is what is generally true. You may find an exception here or there, of course. People have free will, and there are people who are given good parenting and choose to do something different. But in general, if you get that training in and get it in when they're young and train them to want to serve God, then that's what they're going to want to do. All right, so I'm going to speak for a while. I just set my timer here. And then after we stop, we're about to take about a 10-minute break, and then we will resume because of our shifted schedule due to the weather. So next slide, we mentioned this also last night, the rod and reproof. In a few minutes, we'll be talking about why those two are important together, give wisdom. But a child left to himself brings shame to his mother, and that happens just constantly. We're going to be talking about some common mistakes to avoid. And I just want to say, as we get started on this, as we go over these mistakes, if you're parenting, you will probably notice, oh, I've done that one, or oh, I've done that one. Well, I've done a number of these too. When we talk about mistakes, I don't know of the perfect parent. We are going to make mistakes sometimes when we're parenting. But like other aspects of life, the important thing to do is what do we do when we see something as a mistake? Do we keep doing it, or do we realize, oh, that's a mistake? I gave this illustration yesterday. You're on a cross-country trip in a car. Well, every once in a while you might notice you're drifting over toward, the line on this side. So what do? You correct. Every once in a while, you notice you're going too far to the left. You correct. Every once in a while, you realize you took a wrong exit. Well, that might put you 20 minutes behind, but you turn around and you correct. So as we go through these mistakes, the point is not to make us feel terrible because, oh, I made a mistake. We're going to make mistakes, but God made children pretty resilient. And if we keep adjusting those, we're also showing our children how to do it. And pretending that we always do it right is not really the message we need to give to our children. They need to see us doing right, and they also need to see us correcting when we're wrong. Because you know what our children are going to be when they grow up? They're going to need to do what's right, and guess what's going to happen? Sometimes they're going to make mistakes, and we need to have trained them what you do when you make a mistake to correct it. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Mistake number one, and if you've ever gone to Walmart, you've seen it, failing to discipline. We have a lot of parents now that just don't discipline their kids. They may scream at them, they may yell at them, but they don't discipline them. So let's look at these Bible passages. He who spares his rod hates his son, but he who loves him. Later we're going to emphasize the motivation here. It doesn't say he who's angry at him, he who's exasperated with him. It's he who loves him, disciplines him, and how? Diligently. Proverbs 19, verse 18. Discipline your son while there is hope. Do not desire his death. There is a certain point at which we don't have that much influence over our children's lives. It's kind of like, I don't know if any of you have worked with pottery. But if you're working with pottery in the early stages, you can do all sorts of things. But after a while, there's not much you can do. So do the training while you can. Proverbs 22, verse 15. Foolishness is bound up in the heart of the child. Kids are going to do some pretty foolish things. The rod of discipline, it will drive it far from him. And sometimes your kids, they're doing something bad, and it's just so funny, you kind of have to hold your hand over your face because of how funny it is. But they got to learn a lesson. Proverbs 23:13. Do not hold back discipline from the child. Although you strike him with the rod, he will not die. Now, let's make a couple of notes here. There are people that abuse children. Don't abuse children. There are people that are in jail and need to be in jail because they just lose their temper, that a child or a baby is crying, and they beat and injure the baby. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about discipline from a loving parent. And kids will, like, I know one family where the brother said to the younger sister, he said, haven't you figured it out? The louder you cry, the sooner the spanking's over. So just because they're making a big deal doesn't mean that they're being hurt. All right, let's continue. We'll talk more about the difference between abuse and discipline as we go by. And I just messed up my timer because I clicked it instead of the, there we go. Yeah, I got it back right, so don't worry. Proverbs 29:15. The rod and reproof bring wisdom, but a child who gets his own way brings shame to his mother. Correct your son, and he will give you comfort. He will also delight your soul. Some of you will have noticed that if you're going along and things are going pretty good, and then a little bit of attitude starts coming up in the toddler or the adolescent or something, and you say something that you see that attitude again, you say something, and then after a few days you start, there's been a lot of that attitude, and then it's getting a little worse, and then you stop and you deal with it. Maybe you should have stopped before, but you weren't putting two and two together. And then they get kind of rebellious, and you stop and you deal with it. And then after that toddler has been dealt with, how do they behave the rest of the day? They're so happy. They want to come up, they get a hug, their attitude, their countenance is lifted. Like before they were kind of like Cain. Why is your countenance falling? And now that you got that attitude adjusted out of there, they're just a happier child. And it gives you comfort and it'll delight your soul. So, discipline. One young lady was talking about, she's working at a daycare, and they're working with these kids, and some of the kids, the parents don't control them at all. And of course, they're trying to do a good job with the kids. But they said a lot of these moms are like into just gentle parenting. And there's lots of advice out there that just let your child be whatever your child wants to be, and that type of thing. There's a lot of foolishness that results in that. Children need training. Children thrive when they are loved, when they're in a joyous atmosphere, when there are boundaries and there are consequences, but when they respect the boundaries, everything's good in here. Children, and when there's expectations that they can live up to and feel good about because they're growing and maturing. Children thrive in that type of atmosphere, where there's no boundaries and they can get away with any attitude and behavior. Listen, a 3-year-old and 4-year-old can come up with some pretty foolish attitudes and behaviors, and where there's no boundaries, they're going to do things that are destructive to them long-term and character-wise, and people around them, they'll be miserable little brats, and they'll make other people around them miserable. Let me share one story here. This was, I was doing this series in Birmingham one time, and somebody told me this story, and I thought, I'm going to start using that. I didn't know if it was true or not, so I always prefaced it with, I don't know if this is true or just a funny story, until I was in Columbia, Tennessee. And Bob Bunting's wife was in the audience. And afterwards, everybody told me, she said, that is a true story. She said, Bob was the one that saw it. I think it was like in the late 50s, maybe early 60s. And she told me some more of the details. And here's how it went. He was staying there for a meeting, and it was family rather well-to-do. They'd had interior decorators, decorate the house with expensive drapes and everything. None of them were hanging correctly because they'd been pulled down by the little toddler. And the tyrant got to do kind of whatever they wanted to do. I think it was a she, so I'll say she. Could have been a he. I don't remember that detail for sure. But one morning, she's in the high chair, I think, and the parent has cooked some eggs or something in the skillet to give to the child for breakfast. And the toddler goes, I don't want it. And the parent said, what do you want? And the tyrant said, I want a worm. The adult went outside, dug around in the dirt until they found a worm. And they brought the child the worm. I want it cooked. They put the worm in the skillet. They cooked the worm. I want it cut in half and you eat half of it. The adult cut the worm in half and the adult ate their half of the worm. And then guess what? Little tyrant didn't want the other half. Was that a happy child? Some parents think, oh, if you don't give them what they won't be happy. No, if you give them everything they want, they will not be happy. That was a miserable little child that needed somebody to care enough about that child to set some boundaries and some expectations. Mistake number 2, rewarding misbehavior. Why would somebody reward misbehavior? Nobody says to a child, hey, go kick grandma and I'll give you $5. It's not that kind of rewarding misbehavior. But rewarding misbehavior does, in fact, happen all the time. Why do children throw tantrums? Think about it. And you've seen this in the store. Why do children throw tantrums? To get what they want. That's why. Why would they think it would work? Because they've seen it work time and time again. By the way, it doesn't have to work every time. It's just like if you got some dishonest people in an office building and you know if you kick the vending machine just right, sometimes you get a free Mountain Dew. You're going to have people that always kick it a few times before they put any money in, because it might work. And that's what children will do. The fact that sometimes they don't get their way doesn't mean they won't throw a tantrum. In fact, in studies with rats, it's been shown when it's not consistent, but it might work, that gets the rat to try it more and more. It's kind of why people play the lottery. They almost never get it, but on the chance that it will, they keep trying to pay it off. Children throw tantrums because they think it might give them what they want. And so, mom's in the grocery store, and little Jaden or whatever says, I want that. And she says, no, we're not getting that today. I want it. No, we're in a hurry. We're not going to get that today. But I want it. It starts making noise. Shh, no. I said, we'll get that another time. We need to go right now. And then he starts screaming, I hate you. You're so mean. He starts kicking at her. And now what's she doing? She's looking around the store because other people are starting to look. And she said, I don't know why. He never does this. Or, I don't know why. He's like, shh. And then, you're embarrassing me. Has little Jaden ever gone, pardon me, I had not realized that would embarrass you, Mother. I'm so sorry. Please buy the rest of the groceries and we'll go home in peace. No, he knows he's embarrassed. He knows that's how it works. You remember the Somali pirates? Why were they capturing ships? Because they knew how it worked. Somebody would drop a bag full of $1 million or something in the ocean, they'd grab it and let the ship go. When a child misbehaves and we as the parent give them what they wanted, we have just rewarded misbehavior. You know what that's going to do? It's going to get more and more misbehavior. Never give a child what they want because they're misbehaving. Just don't do that. Lowering the bar, accommodating, facilitating misbehavior. Don't do that. Keep the bar high. Letting a child get his way is not doing him a favor. It will spoil him, like the little girl in the worm. Letting a child get his way will not satisfy him. It will spoil him. I heard about a study done where there was a city playground and there were streets around the playground and no fences. Here's all the playground equipment, but no fence. Well, there's buses and cars and trucks and strangers out there. Guess where the kids played? Toward the center of the playground. Then they put up a fence. Guess where the kids played? They played all over the playground. See, now they know where the boundaries are. This is our area. We can do this. Kids thrive with boundaries. I imagine some of you have seen this. If your home is a home where dad loves mom, mom loves dad, mom and dad love the kids, and mom and dad love God, and there's rules in that home. When a child from a chaotic, dysfunctional home spends time in your home, what have you noticed? They love it there. They look forward to being there. They want to be there. Why? There's more rules there. They can get away with, fighting and using bad words, watching dirty moving stuff elsewhere, but they know they can't do it at your house, yet they want to be at your house anyway. Why? Because it's not chaos. And because there is love, and they don't mind that there's boundaries there. They might have to learn a boundary or two at the beginning, but they see something valuable there. That's why they want to be there. The difference, somebody said, between a boy and a pig is that you give both of them everything they want. You'll have a really, really good tasting pig and a really, really bad boy. So don't give them everything they want. The rod and reproof bring wisdom, but a child who gets his own way brings shame to his mother. Mistake number 3, not rewarding misbehavior, but expecting misbehavior. This is a sneaky one. And partly it's complicated by the fact that different kids have different personalities. If you've had several children, you know they don't come all wired the same way. And I hope to have time to talk about on Wednesday night the strengths and weaknesses to different personality types, like pleasers and self-willed kids. They both have a strength and they both have a great weakness. They both need to be trained. But sometimes a parent will just kind of have a sigh of recognition, like this child was fairly easy, child was fairly, this one's not, and after a while they start giving up. And so they don't want misbehavior, they're not hoping for misbehavior, they're not preferring misbehavior, but they've decided to expect misbehavior. And so here he is, maybe he's 5 years old. Oh, we can't take him to the restaurant. There's no way he's going to sit still for an hour. Well, after all that sugar, he's going to be impossible. I'll never get him to eat that. Sorry, my son's not much of a sharer. And who hears all of that? That little guy hears all that. And he's kind of hearing that he's defective. He's also hearing that his parents can't control him. And if his parents have given up on controlling him, what motivation does he have to try to control himself? And this parent's kind of given up on that child. If you're having an attitude like that with one of your kids, back up and don't give up on him. He needs you to train him. He might not have the same personality as his older sister. She might not have the same personality as her older brother, but that little guy or that little girl, she needs you to train him. Don't get discouraged. Don't give up. It's a different challenge than the one before. They're not all the same. Do the work and don't give up on it. Foolishness is bound up in the heart of the child. The rod of discipline will drive it far from him. And let me just say here, some of the things that we need to be instilling in all kids. Some kids you have to work on this more, some kids, but here's some general things all kids need. They need to learn to obey. Like we talked about yesterday, respecting no, that teaches them to respect authority. It teaches them you don't always get what you want. It teaches them behavior is more important than desire, and it teaches them to have self-control. That's important. They all need to learn to obey. And all children need to learn to care about other people. And children need to learn how to work. I was seeing something on a report, or it's something on the internet just the other day, talking about how much better it is for children when they have chores. And when I say work, I don't mean work all the time. Kids should have lots of times to have, to play and have fun. Kids are just so much fun, and we should have fun with them. But if we let them grow up thinking that everything's just fun, it's supposed to be fun, and they've got no responsibilities, and they can just watch TV for hours and be on their phone for hours and do whatever they want to do all day, that's horrible. They need to learn responsibility, and they need to learn how to work. And when they have some chores and they learn how to do things, it builds self-worth and it prepares them for life. Now, some of you on your jobs have dealt with young people in the last 10, 20 years that you realize that they never learned how to work. There's a lot of young ladies who are unhappy in their marriages because they got married to a guy they thought was a young man, and then they found out they married a boy. And there's a lot of that going around. Character needs to be taught. In childhood, it's a time to be teaching things. As a general rule, you get what you expect. If you expect tantrums, you will get them. If you expect dishonesty, you will get it. If you expect bad attitudes, you will get it. But if you really expect the opposite, require and train for the opposite, you will get the opposite. What do I mean by that? By expecting there won't be tantrums, there won't be? Oh no, there might be a tantrum. But you have a conversation and you have discipline with that child, and they learn you will never do that again. This is not tolerated. And they find out it doesn't get them what they want. So it might happen, but then stop it. Barney Fife's line, he was supposed to be in error when he said it, but I like it. Nip it in the bud. There's a lot of things in it. Nip that thing in the bud before it gets all in full bloom. I remember my oldest on the dishonesty. One time when she was maybe 2 or so, I looked at her little tennis shoe and there was ink all over it. And I said, April, I said, what happened to your shoe there? Who did that? She goes, a snake did it. And I said, April, snakes don't have hands to hold a pen with. He held it in his mouth. And see, here's the thing. If you don't teach your child to be honest when they're 2, when they're 16, they'll be good enough at it that you won't know which times they're lying and which times they're telling the truth. But if you deal with it at 2, you can be Sherlock Holmes. To the child, it's like, Dad figured out that it wasn't a snake. And that was the hardest spanking she had ever gotten to that point. We had a long talk about it and discussed it in great deal. She could tell this was really, really serious. And then she got a hard spanking. And that's been a truthful girl. Why did I take that so seriously? I didn't want to have a little liar. And I've had to help other families with their teenager who somebody said, I saw them doing this, and they said, I didn't do it. And the parents, sometimes, parents don't know who to believe and stuff, or I don't know who to believe in somebody. I didn't want that. I wanted children so that when they were older, I didn't expect my child will never do something stupid or never misbehave. Of course they're going to, but I wanted them to be honest. And I knew if we had honesty, we could deal with other things. So when my little 2-year-old lied, we had a really serious talk about it. And she got a spanking that helped her remember it. And she knew not to do that. So, it doesn't mean it won't happen, but let the child realize, no, that's not what we're going to do. Let's continue. Failing to be consistent. This is one of the big ones. And if you're parenting, you'll catch yourself sometime not being consistent, and then you'll realize you're behind the 8 ball because you've let a few things slip, and then you have to catch it up. Kind of like if you're not paying attention to the garden for a couple weeks, then oh no, and you're having to do some catch up. Be consistent. Look at this verse here. He who spares the rod hates his son. He who loves him disciplines him how? Diligently. A child psychologist who wrote an article, who was a good child psychologist, I think, said that children are like little gamblers. If there's a chance, they'll go for it. Let them know that the lottery is shut down. There's 0 chance of it working out. Here's an illustration. Suppose you've got a section in town where there's no parking. Maybe it's a town that has a historic section and it's a pedestrian area, and you got a lot of tourists come to this, like up in Boston or something like that. And you have these signs that says no parking at any time. Well, of course, a lot of people would like to park there, right? You don't want to pay $25 to park in the garage or this or that. It would be nice to be able to park there. Why don't people park there? Because they know there's a sign. But more than that, they know the sign means business. They won't park there, and they'll go to the inconvenience to walk through the rain or park in the garage because they know it's not a sign with no teeth. But what if all the tourists and everybody in town knows that the person that does the patrolling for the tickets operates like this? If you park there, you're going to get a slip of paper on your windshield after 10 minutes that says, please don't park here. 10 minutes later, we asked you not to park here. 30 minutes later, I really mean it, do not park here. 40 minutes later, don't make me tell you again. 15 minutes later, I'm going to start counting to 10. And then if you're there for an hour, okay, now you're in trouble and you get a ticket. If everybody knows that that's how it works, what do you think is going to be on that street? It's going to be a whole lot of parked cars with various colored slips of paper on the window because everybody knows how it works. I was in Nebraska talking on this series one time, and somebody told me about a story in their family. Little Mary Elizabeth was upstairs, and her mom's calling her, Mary, come down, and she just keeps playing. Mary, come down, she just keeps playing. Mary, get down here. And after a bit, the aunt says, is watching, and then finally the mom employs the middle name. Mary Elizabeth, get down here. And Mary just keeps playing. And the aunt says, Mary, why didn't you go? Mary goes, she'll call 3 more times. So one time I just asked a bunch of parents in a group setting, I said, what's your best 3-word parenting advice? My favorite answer was first-time obedience. Train the child to obey on the first time. Be consistent. Number 5, thinking I don't have time. I mentioned yesterday a lady, well, I don't have time to deal with the disobedience. And like I said then, that's like saying I don't have time to get rid of lice. If you don't deal with it, it's going to be a problem. Child training time is well invested time, and it saves time. What does Hebrews 12 says? All discipline for the moment seems not joyful, but sorrowful. Yet afterwards, it yields the peaceful fruit. And sometimes it's inconvenient. We had 6 kids, 3 boys, 3 girls. First one was born in '84. The last one was born in 2004. So the last one just graduated from high school about a 1.5 years ago. 3 of them decided, and I'll tell you the story about this later tonight. 3 of them decided at one point to just go for it and disobey. The other 3, they would occasionally disobey, but then when they got in trouble, they backed off and they'd apologize, and we'd go again and live to battle another day. But 3 of them, they picked a time that they decided not to obey. I'm going to tell you about one of those now. I'll tell you about one of them later. So when Zach was little, and this was inconvenient, it took some time. When Zach was little, it was Sunday morning, and I asked him, I said, Zach, come over here, because he's just a little bitty guy. around 1 or so, something. And I said, come here, I'm going to put your pants on you. And he just decided he wasn't going to do it. I said, Zach, come here. And he wouldn't. So I went over. And I said, Zach, Daddy said, come. So you have to come. So I took his hand, and I gave him a little pop. Then I went back to where I was, and I told him to come, and he wouldn't come. And he got another spanking, and he wouldn't come. And after a while, the whole family was in there. Now, some of you are thinking, why not just put the pants on? Because I'm training my child. I can control a 1-year-old. I can put pants on a 1-year-old whether they want pants on them or not. But that's the son that God gave me, and I'm going to train him. If his pants go on him only because I force it on him, he didn't submit and obey. So he needs to obey. The whole family is in there, and his 4 older brothers and sisters, or at least, yeah, most of them, and one might have been in college. But they're like, Zach, go to Dad, go to Dad. And he'd go to Mom, he'd go to a sister, and they said, nope, you got to go to Dad. And he wouldn't. He got another spanking. Over and over. He got another spanking. He got another spanking. It took about 45 minutes. I called church in the building, and I said, I need somebody to teach my class because I'm having a discipline problem with Zach. And can somebody teach it? One guy said, yeah, I'll teach him. Because I wasn't going to give up and let him win. And I then did something I wish I'd done earlier. I took a break. He's standing there thinking about it. I took a break, went and got my shower, and when I came back, it gave me a chance to calm down. So if I could do this in reverse, I'd have given a break in between. But now I come back, and the spankings have gotten harder, and but I came back, and everybody's there. Come on, Zach, do it. And I said, Zach, come over here, and let me put your pants on. And his little heart broke, and he came across the room, and we put his pants on. Now, that took some time, and a lot of people would have thought, you're wasting time. No, I wasn't. That was the day, and he only did it one time growing up. That was the one time that my little Zach decided, I am not going to obey. And that was the time that he needed to learn, yes, Zach, you are. And he learned. And then, I don't even remember him getting many spankings after that. He had to go through that test. And he did. All discipline seems for the moment not joyful but sorrowful, yet afterwards it yields peaceful fruit. He who spares a rod hates his son. He who loves him disciplines him diligently. Number 6, failing to control self. This is a big mistake. Sometimes when we're raising children, and especially there might be a number of other things going wrong. Maybe your mom's in the hospital with surgery. Maybe there's trouble at work. Maybe there's a problem with some bills or headache with insurance. Maybe there's something else. And then maybe something's difficult in family and some of the kids are misbehaving. And then one of them does something that really irritates you. And you know one of the things that really irritates us about our kids? When we see them doing things and we know where they got it. You ever seen that? It's like if my child does that, okay, I need to train him in that. If he does that, I need to train him in that. But then when he acts just like me, it's like, it's like I know where he got that. And that's frustrating. But for one reason or another, we get frustrated and then we don't control ourselves. And can that little girl, can they tell that we're angry and acting out of anger? Yeah, and that's just not very effective. It might be some effective, but it's very, very different, and that's not what's called for. Because what was the motive of discipline in Proverbs? He who loves him disciplines him diligently. So that's the proper motivation. Discipline versus abuse. We've already talked about that some. Let's emphasize it again. Do not abuse the child. Don't injure a child. Spank a child, yes, and when they're little, it doesn't need to be much. Later, if the first one didn't work, it would be more. Later, my mom, I remember she'd tell us when we were like in grade school, grade school, so like 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever, 7, 8, 9 probably was a lot of it. She'd say, boys, 3 boys, sometimes we'd get squabbling, get fighting and stuff, whatever. And she'd say, go get a switch. And we'd have to go out in the yard. We'd have to pick a switch. And she'd come back in and she'd spank us. And it stung, and I learned a lesson. I'm glad she did that. But a lot of people would say that's abuse. It's not. My mom was not abusing us. She was training us because my little 7, 8-year-old self or whatever needed it. I heard a child expert on a TV program one time talking about this, and it's one of those talk shows, here's the man and here's the woman host, and you've got the expert on there, and he's totally against any physical discipline at all. And he says, you don't do that. And he called it hitting a child himself. Never, never. And the mom host, she says, well, I've got a 2-year-old, and if they are about to touch something dangerous, I'll pat their hand. And he goes, and it's important to know that that's wrong. And he's the expert, and then a lady in the back has a question, and this was her question. She said, my problem is I yell and scream at my kids. And he laughed. He goes, don't worry about that. I yell and scream at my kids too. Let me ask you a question. If you grew up in a home, not an abusive home, if you grew up in a home with loving discipline, would you have rather gotten a spanking now and then or had your parents screaming and yelling at you? I'm so glad I grew up in a home where I got spankings instead of being screamed and yelled at. That's abusive. My mom was not abusing me at all. She loved me and I knew it. And she was never screaming and yelling at us. That's abusive. And don't ever say this to John. What's wrong with you? I don't know why you won't do right. What's wrong with you? You may be frustrated, but you need to use some self-control. Because what message did you just send to that little guy right there? That little 4-year-old, 5-year-old. You just told him there's something wrong with you, and the adults don't know what it is. That's terrible. Don't do that to the child. Keep in control yourself. If you're not in control of yourself, that's not the time to be disciplining your child. Here's a test. Let's imagine that you've got a vase, and this vase is passed down from your great-grandmother, and you had it appraised at Antiques Roadshow, and it's worth $20,000, okay? And it's up there on the mantle, and you're so very, very proud of it. And one day your little guy comes in, and he's got a ball, and he's throwing it in the house. Now, for this scenario, we're going to assume you didn't have a rule before. By the way, the rules in your house, it's not important how many rules you have, it's important how you enforce them. We had a room in our house where we would play football inside the house. It was a big room. And it was, you could throw the ball in there. In this scenario, you haven't discussed that yet, but he comes in, he's throwing his ball off the wall and catching it. Mom says, not trying to pick on Jaden's, but we'll just keep going with Jaden. No, we'll switch it to Caleb. Caleb? I said, Caleb, don't throw the ball in the house. Now, suppose Caleb looks at Mom and said, yes, ma'am, puts the ball down and goes outside and plays the ball. We're good. Says, yes, ma'am, puts down the ball, and he goes and does something else. We're good. But suppose Caleb goes, she says, Caleb, don't throw the ball in the house. And Caleb goes, what does Mom do? Scenario A, nothing broke. He just looked at you, defied you, and threw the ball. You know what a lot of moms do? a lot of moms, it's not a big deal. And she goes, Caleb, I asked you not to do that. Caleb, stop doing that. Caleb, don't make me tell you again. Caleb, I'm going to... Don't do that. What if that same mom said, Caleb, don't throw the ball in the house. He looked at her, he heard her, and he throws the ball, and it ricochets. Now what does mom do? Does she go, Caleb, I asked you not to do that? Oh, no. No, 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 no. What before would have been ignored is not ignored now. Her precious vase got shattered. She is ballistic. She's in there. She's yelling. She's screaming. She's snapping him up. She's smacking. Why? I think we all know why. She's not doing this because she loves Caleb. She's doing this because she's mad at Caleb, and she's going to take it out on him. That's not right. The fact is, Caleb should have been in serious trouble whether it broke or not. He didn't intend to break it, but he did intend to disobey. He did intend to be disrespectful and defy his mom, and that is a big deal. Because you know what? There was something in that room worth a lot more than the vase. And that's little Caleb's soul. That's what's valuable, is her son. And the first time when nothing got broke but he defied her, something was broken. His respect for his parents was broken, and his attitude was broken. And mom should have stopped everything else and gone and talked to Caleb and punished Caleb and gotten an apology from Caleb and then given Caleb a hug after his attitude was right before anything else happened. And that's more important than the vase. See how we're doing on time. Calm, consistent, and in control. When we're not calm, our kids can tell that. And chaos doesn't tend to produce order. Chaos tends to produce disorder. Consistent. If we're in a good mood and relaxed and we deal with our kids one day and we don't another day, don't expect them to behave right. Be consistent. And in control. Don't go out eating worms because you're trying to placate your little tyrant. Calm, consistent, and in control. Goes a long, long way. Number 7, the mistake of training them to disrespect instructions given calmly. This is real easy to do. I told you about the mom that I watched saying, no, don't touch that, get down. I said, no, get down. Do you hear me? I said, get down, don't touch that, don't. And the whole time, he's just climbing up to get it. He hears her, he's just ignoring her. And said, don't, I said, don't. And then when he got it, she goes, I'm going to get him a hearing aid. There was no punishment, no consequences. Training them to disrespect instructions given calmly. So here he is again, and it's bedtime, and I'm not a big fan of kids spending much time on video games. Some it's okay, but we've got way too much just slavery to electronics in our lives. Whether it could be us online, our kids online, our wives online, our lives online, it gets so addictive. But in this illustration, it's not that it's wrong, but in this illustration, that's what he's doing. He's playing a video game, and mom goes, Junior, it's time to go to bed. And he goes, okay, just a minute. He was like, Junior, you need to go to bed. You got a test tomorrow. All right. Junior, I'm almost done. I just got to finish this level. And every time she says something, it's just, and then after a bit, she gets a phone call, she and her sister talking about, some family crisis and stuff. They're on the phone for about an hour. She hangs up, she looks back there, and there he still is. And now she comes in there, and it's like, Junior, you get up right now. Now what does he do? Down goes the controller, and gets up and he goes. And she goes, oh, why does he do that? I'll tell you exactly why he does that. Because she has trained unintentionally, but she has absolutely trained him to disrespect instructions given in a calm voice. He knows that when she's not yelling, he can ignore her. He can ignore her and ignore her and ignore her and ignore her until it's red zone and she's yelling and screaming, and now he knows it means business. So what I would suggest she do is this, and after this point we'll take a break. What I would suggest she do is this. Have a talk with him, and I would recommend apologizing. And it might go something like this, do you like it when I yell at you? He goes, no, because he hadn't been trained enough to say no, ma'am. He goes, no. And she says, well, Junior, says, I'm going to make it my goal to not yell at you anymore. Junior goes, cool. Instead, I'm going to calmly tell you what to do, and then you're going to do it. But I'm not going to yell. And little Junior, okay? And that night, and she explains this in some detail and everything, and that night, and my wife added, give him a warning. So she says, okay, Junior, you need to be winding up because in 5 minutes it's bedtime. And again, because he hadn't been taught to say yes, yes ma'am, he goes, uh-huh. And then a little bit later she says, okay, Junior, it's time to go to bed. Right this minute. Hey, what? Come over here, Junior. What? Well, I told you it was bedtime and you didn't go. But, and then she says, well, remember we talked about this. I'm not going to yell and scream anymore. And she sits down and she has a long talk with him. Says, when I tell you, you need to do it, you need to do it. And you didn't. And she gives him a talking to about it, and then she spanks him. And then he goes to bed. The next night, what's probably going to happen? Probably the same thing. And maybe the next night. But if she keeps being consistent, you know what's going to happen? Because it may take a little time because you have absolutely trained Pavlov's dog to act in a certain way, and it's going to take a little untraining. But once he gets it, now what's he going to do? Instead of obeying when she's screaming, he's going to obey when she says, okay, Junior, it's time to go to bed. Yes, ma'am. So, don't train your children to disrespect instructions given calmly. Don't yell at your kids. Don't scream at your kids. Teach your kids. Train your kids. But don't train them to only obey when you're yelling and screaming. Just don't do that. Deal with it when they don't. So it's your choice. They never obey. They obey after we scream. They obey after we say it over and over and over. Or they obey on the first time to calm instructions without yelling, nagging, badgering, etc. And with that, my timer's going off, and we're going to take a 10-minute break. Thanks.